pain without the pain having you. If it's a goodist thought that's going through my head, or a perfectionist thing, or a complaint, or a all kinds of crazy things that can go through our minds, I've learned if I try and get in there and fix them, then it's just more thinking and more stuff, and then it's having me. I'm not an observer anymore, I'm a participant in it. Then I'm innocently falling into the illusion of there's something to fix. Something to fix in my thinking, something to fix in my body, something to fix in my circumstances. And that's a lot of busy work that just is like exhausting, which I think a lot of people in pain have that experience also, of just being so tired by it. Because it's exhausting being in pain, and it's exhausting trying to be perfect, trying to be the good person all the time. So now, rather than trying to fix that kind of goodist perfectionist thinking, I'm kind of more observing it and watching it going by, and seeing that, there's always going to be another thought. There's always, it's just flowing all the time. That's the way it's supposed to be.
That's our guest, Hana Studley, and she is this week's guest on the Alter Your Health podcast, your source of information and inspiration to promote the holistic transformation of your health and the health of our planet. And my name is Dr. Benjamin Alter. I'm your host. I'm a naturopathic physician licensed in the state of Colorado, but offering holistic lifestyle medicine services online worldwide. And you can find out more about all we do at Alter Health by visiting www.alter.health. And you can even get on our schedule for a complimentary 15-minute consultation to learn how we can support you in achieving your health and wellness goals, reversing disease, promoting longevity, all that good stuff with the power of a whole food, plant-based diet and understanding mind-body medicine. This episode is a great one. I connect with Hana Studley, and her name is Hana, even though I say Chana in the beginning of this episode, which I am a little bit embarrassed about, but that's all right. I haven't heard Hana's name pronounced by anyone until today. So I am familiar with the work that Hana has been doing in the world of mind, body, holistic health stuff. We talk all about her journey in this conversation, of course. We talk about the 3 principles of mind, thought, and consciousness and how they relate to our experience physically with pain and with health. We also talk about the work of Dr. John Sarno, another hero of mine, who kind of coined the term TMS, or tension myositis syndrome. Some people have referred to it as too much stress. Dr. Sarno talks about how stress and psychological tension manifests physically to create pain. So we talk about that process as well in this conversation. And most importantly, we talk about how to get out from chronic stress, how to, surface from being buried from chronic pain, chronic stress, and get our head above water again and feel great in our bodies. And do that through simply understanding, without any prescriptive protocols or practices, but just understanding the mind, thought, connection, and where our feelings, where our emotions, where our symptoms really come from. So Hana Studley, she has some experience in recovering from trauma. She actually was mugged 3 times. She shares those stories in this conversation, and she nearly died. And she lived with trauma for quite some time, as you might expect. But she no longer lives with that trauma. She is free from that trauma, and she talks about how she has freed herself from that trauma by understanding the 3 principles of mind, thought, and consciousness. So Hana has also written a book called The Myth of Low Self-Esteem, which kind of fictionally portrays her story of coming into this understanding of mind, thought, and consciousness. And she has a lot to offer, and you can find out all of those things that she is offering, supporting people in freeing themselves from pain through understanding this sort of stuff. So go on and visit her website, hanastudley.com for more. That's CHANASTUDLEY.com. And also, she's got a great Facebook group, which is an open community of people sharing their insights and sharing their experience with pain and with healing. And the name of her Facebook group, if you'd like to find it, is TMS Chronic Pain and the Three Principles. And that is what our conversation is about today. TMS, chronic pain, and the three principles. Also, trauma, how that plays into our experience physically as human beings. So without further ado, just invite you to sit back, put your feet on the ground, take a breath, let it go. Be here now and enjoy this wonderful conversation with our guest, Hana Studley. So, Chana, welcome to the Alter Your Health podcast. So excited to connect and share this conversation with you.
Hi, it's nice to be here. Thanks. It's actually Hana. You can Hana. Forget this. Yeah, Hana. There you go. It's quite simple.
That's very easy. When I typed it in, or when I see it written down, rather, the first thing that comes to mind is like the Indian dish. I think Chana is like garbanzo beans or chickpeas.
Yeah, I never thought of that.
Hana. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Got it. So Hana, really excited to connect, share a conversation about some of my favorite things, pain and principles and health, and just the connection between the mind and the body. And I think that the timing of this conversation is also pretty timely because, interestingly enough, like 3 days ago, I kind of started getting tension in my lower back. And that is not something that it's not something that is a regular occurrence to me. I've been running and stuff and, just kind of tweaked something, but it's persisting and I'm looking at what's going on and I'm ready for an insight. I'm ready for the pain and the tension and that feeling to dissipate. And I know that it will. And looking forward to see what this conversation has to do, because obviously we scheduled this long before there was any any sort of pain that was in my experience. Anyways, the timing is interesting.
Yeah.
So we're just talking about how the people tuning into this episode, I'm sure, have pain, have their experience of pain, have various understandings in terms of where that pain is coming from and how they might be able to approach the pain and relate with the pain in a new way that can allow it to shift and change and maybe, invite an experience of well-being that spans beyond pain or no pain. So I'd like to maybe just start this conversation. I know that you've written a book that it's not your story, but it's kind of your story told fictionally through characters. And I'd like to know a little bit about your story.
Sure, thank you. The book is definitely not an autobiography. It's about a girl called Deborah. But once you get to know me, you see that she has I'd say about 80% of the story is true. And so when I was writing it, I thought this would be my one and only novel. Like they say, everybody has one novel in them. And I'd had quite a few adventures, so several people had tried to persuade me to write it. So I wrote it about somebody else so that I could really show a journey of how this particular young woman went through a lot of trauma. And then she kind of went on a journey of understanding her experience and how her mind works. And it's kind of what happened to me. I kind of got stuck in the self-help aisle at the bookstore, like a lot of people do, and trying out different things. And eventually, about 5 years ago, I came across, this understanding that we call the three principles, or sometimes it's called innate health. And that really kind of was like the punchline in putting all that searching together. It kind of gave me a vocabulary for what I've been kind of suspecting and understanding for quite a long time about how the mind works. And so it just kind of all came together, and that's how I kind of came to write the novel. It starts out with, say, a lot of trauma, because I was actually mugged 3 times. I grew up in England, and I was mugged twice in Manchester and once in London. My skull was fractured. I had a broken vertebrae in my neck, 2 broken vertebrae, and 3 herniated discs. And so for 25 years, I had chronic pain. And I was always told that the pain had come from those injuries. And because I'm not a doctor, what do I know? Of course, like if I wake up with my arm numb, they say, well, that's where the nerve came out of, your neck, and that's where the injuries were. So, so the first book I wrote is really about recovering from trauma, and that journey. And now I'm like more on a journey of understanding, more the science behind the pain, and like why we have it. And that's going to be the next book.
Exciting. So I'm curious, I know that you've got this Facebook group that you invited me into, and that's kind of how we're sitting here today, which is awesome, where you're kind of tying things together for people, and people are sharing their experiences and insights about pain and the principles and this understanding. And I think what's the name of the group again? It's something about TMS, tension myositis syndrome, right?
Yeah.
And the work of Dr. John Sarno.
Right. So originally I called the group trauma anxiety, like understanding trauma, anxiety, and stress. I think that's what I originally called it, because that was kind of, I thought that's kind of because that's my experience, that's who my audience would be. But as the pain thing has really it's taken off, and there's so many people suffering in pain, that I kind of narrowed it down to really help people and bring this understanding to them. So TMS, so the group is called TMS, Chronic Pain and the 3 Principles. I think that's what it's called. And we have like over 1,000 people now, which is so exciting to be bringing so many people to this understanding. And just for your listeners who don't know, TMS, it originally stood for tension myoneural syndrome. And that was a diagnosis that was brought up by Dr. Sarno, Dr. John Sarno, who was a rehabilitation medicine doctor in New York at the University Hospital. He later changed it to the mind-body syndrome. But I've also heard people call it too much stress, which as a layperson, I feel more qualified to call it that. It's too much stress. That's what's, because his original ideas were that a dysregulated nervous system that's coming from, from my understanding, it's coming from distressed thinking, then dysregulates the nervous system, which then can dysregulate all several systems in the body, particularly blood flow. And so it's not taking enough oxygen to the muscles, and that's what's causing the pain. And he said it's as little as 5% depletion of oxygen can cause excruciating pain. So when I'm working with people, the first thing I say to them is the pain is real. You're not imagining it. Even though we're going to kind of talk about it being in your head, it really is real. And Dr. Sarno said it was one of the most excruciating clinical pains he'd ever seen, in all his like 40, 50 years of clinical practice. And when I used to have, like you mentioned about having twinges in your back, so that's how mine always started. Like the muscles in the middle of my back would start to squeeze, and then that would like shift my pelvis out of place. And I always describe it as being like Marilyn Monroe on one side and Audrey Hepburn on the other side. I was like, curvy on this side, and I was like bent sideways. And when it got really bad, I couldn't stand up straight, so I was bent sideways and forward. And then the sciatica pain would shoot down my leg, usually my right leg, sometimes my left leg as well. And so the good news is that if it's just oxygen depletion, that it's benign, it's not doing any damage, it's just really, really painful because there's not enough oxygen going to the muscles. And when I learned this, it was such a relief, because I'd always been told it was structural. It's because I have one leg longer than the other. It's because I have these herniated discs, or it's because my pelvis is unstable. It's because you reach for the seatbelt wrong. I mean, really? That's like the kind of things I was told. And like my clients now, I have a questionnaire that I give to my clients, and some of the explanations they've been given by doctors, like long neck syndrome. I mean, what is that? Or overusing their feet. Like, we've been walking on our feet for thousands of years. We have the most advanced shoes in the history of the universe, and this lady was told she'd overused her feet. And I'm like, really? and I think the whole, traditional medical system is set up to look at our bodies as broken and needing fixing. And I actually feel stronger today than I did like when I was in my teens. Like the pain has gone away. I've been pain-free for about 5 years now, which incidentally is around the time I've been around the three principles, which is kind of why I, came to put all these ideas together. And so Dr. Sarno, he later started saying that it was to do with repressed rage and the subconscious. And I'm like, that is so last century. We've got a whole new paradigm of understanding how the mind works now. So I really respect and appreciate his medical input, but I kind of diverge as far as his solutions and his treatment. Yeah.
Awesome. That's cool. That's kind of my similar relationship with him.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen the film that was made about him and his work, All the Rage?
Yeah. Michael Galinsky, the director, he's in my Facebook group.
He was a guest on the podcast last year.
Oh, really? Yeah. Oh, nice guy. Yeah. Yes. The film is really, really good. Yeah.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was my first introduction to Dr. Sarno, and I've read his books, and he is really a pioneer in this mind-body stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And like you kind of pointed out, like there's still things to connect. There's still kind of gaps to fill, holes to fill in the understanding. So I'm curious, what came first for you, the principles or Dr. Sarno?
The principles.
The principles came first, and then Dr. Sarno. So from a principles-based understanding, which we're going to get into a little bit deeper, of course, like you kind of alluded to it a little bit, but like how did you see the work of Dr. Sarno, and what did you think of it? And what did you talked about this kind of suppressed rage component that didn't sit well with you, but what, in terms of kind of his other theories and what he was teaching, what was your feeling about it?
Well, the first book I read, I think was actually his second book. And when I was reading it, and he talked about how people were getting well just from reading his first book, I thought, well, they've had a new thought, right? It was so obvious to me. It kind of jumped off the page. Well, yes, because obviously it couldn't be anything structural. Otherwise, they would have needed to go into his office and had treatment or a manipulation or injections or a surgery or something. But nothing changed about their bodies physically other than understanding. And so he called that knowledge therapy. And some people could get well just from reading his book. So I'm like, well, clearly they've had an insight from understanding, like how I just kind of explained very quickly about how the blood's not flowing properly. That's what's causing the pain. Just, I think the relief of knowing that for a lot of people, they could just read that and go, wow, yes, I'm under a lot of stress right now, whether it's work or family or school or something. And that they can kind of start tying it together, and like the light bulbs start going off. Oh my gosh, yes, my back kept going out when I was helping my neighbor move house, or my back went out when I was doing something else I was nervous about, or maybe I was going through a divorce or bankruptcy, or so. Like, it doesn't even have to be a big thing like that. It could be, just dealing with the kids and carpool. I've heard of people having panic attacks in carpool. So it could be just like all kinds of things that maybe we're not dealing with, and then that gets the nervousness dysregulates it activates the fight or flight response is really what it does, and it puts us into protective mode, and it kind of tells the body that we're living in danger. Like mine, I had PTSD after my muggings, so I think that kind of just put me into a mindset of being on guard the whole time, which is kind of putting you under a state of stress, every day. And so as I was reading his books, and I thought, well, the people getting well, they've clearly had an insight that has set them free, of that old idea. And I thought that, from an understanding of the three principles, that we're always feeling our thinking, that we're always living in a thought-created world, that made perfect sense to me. I could see how someone could get well from just reading a book. And then some people who didn't get such an effect from reading the book, they would go and have a consultation with him. And so that's like a bit more like seeing a man in a white coat gives it a bit more authority. And so that kind of helped them have an insight. I've read accounts of people crawling in on their hands and knees, not being able to stand up, like in excruciating pain, and being like a 20-minute consultation with him and walking out, because he would then touch them like just checking you out. There's nothing wrong with you. He'd like, get out of my office. There's nothing wrong with you. And just having that, like the comfort of knowing that from an actual, physical medical doctor was enough to give them an insight that they were well. And then the people who didn't get well from the consultation, he started having lectures every, I think, Tuesday night in the hospital, and people would come for these lectures. And then a lot of people got well from the lecture. And then from like more and more detailed medical information. And then the people who didn't get well from that, he would then send them to a psychiatrist. Because at some point, a psychoanalyst, I think his name was Stanley Cohen, he kind of came in and told Dr. Sarno all about psychoanalysis. And so they kind of got together and thought, aha, it's repressed rage. That's what's causing it. Because one of the fascinating things about it was that he noticed that most of his patients had a certain personality type, that they were perfectionists and goodists, and like they wanted to do it the right way. And so he kind of tied those two ideas together. And now I just see that as like someone who's really stuck in their thinking, like really, when we get up in our heads, we have a story going on in our heads that things have to be a certain way. And often the world is not so simple, and it can be much more challenging than that. If we're the kind of people who are brought up not to get angry or not to express emotions, then we just kind of start to get all tied up in our thinking.
Yeah. Well, I like how Dr. Sarno talks about these goodists, and I think that a lot of us can relate to being a goodist, if not all the time, at least many times in our life. So, on that topic, just like, I'm curious about your kind of recommendation, or what you might invite someone to consider or think about instead of being a perfectionistic person and goodist, because I think that our society kind of prides and to some extent brings that out in us. So what is the alternative opportunity, or what might be a more healthy relationship?
I guess what I would say is, like for a long time, like I trained as a life coach and a counselor, 30 years ago. So I've been working with people for a long time before I even came across the principles, and working as a trauma counselor. And a lot of the training I had was in terms of techniques. If you have this problem, you do this. So, and for a long time, I knew that negative thinking had got me into a lot of trouble. So then positive thinking must be better, right?
Right.
So for a long time, that's what I was like teaching my clients, and I was, teaching them how to ignore their thinking. Because if you're having a thought that's, like not helpful, or it's screaming in your head, or it's criminal, or kinds of, like crazy thoughts that can go through our heads, it's like, okay, I was like, just blank it out, and like would teach myself and teach other people how to ignore their thinking. But looking back, I think that was really, like my mother would call that moving furniture on the Titanic. It's like the boat's going down and you're redecorating, it's like, so because like positive thinking is, as much as it's so much better than negative thinking, but it's still more thinking, and it's still a lot of trying to control that thinking. So from the understanding I have now, it's more about stepping back and observing the thinking, so this just came into my head, so I guess I'll say it. I remember a while ago listening to a recording of a conversation between Elsie Spittle and Linda Pransky, who are two of the most like amazingly wonderful three principles teachers. I've learned with both of them. And the conversation went something like this. Elsie was talking about how her husband had been seriously ill and rushed into the hospital. Thank God he's fine now. It was a while ago. And And so she, in the waiting room, waiting for the surgeons or whoever, was dealing with her husband, she was going in and out of panic, which is understandable. Her husband was in surgery or in a really bad way. And she said that she could feel herself going in and out of panic, but it didn't frighten her. Right? And so Linda Pransky says to her, she's like, see, this is why I love you, because you could have the panic without the panic having you. And Elsie said, yeah, I had the experience without the experience having me. And I thought, you could have pain without the pain having you. And so by able to step back and observe experiences, so if it's a goodist thought that's going through my head, or a perfectionist thing, or a complaint, or a all kinds of crazy things that can go through our minds. So I've learned if I try and get in there and fix them, then it's just more thinking and more stuff, and then it's having me. It's making me. I'm not an observer anymore. I'm a participant in it, which kind of then I'm innocently falling into the illusion of there's something to fix. Something to fix in my thinking, something to fix in my body, something to fix in my circumstances, and that's a lot of busy work that just is like exhausting. Which I think a lot of people in pain have that experience also, of just being so tired by it, because it's exhausting being in pain, and it's exhausting trying to be perfect, trying to be the good person all the time. So now, rather than trying to fix that kind of goodist perfectionist thinking, I'm kind of more observing it and watching it going by, and seeing that there's always going to be another thought. There's always it's just flowing all the time. That's the way it's supposed to be.
How about the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza and people like him? Curious what your thoughts are. It's been, whenever I introduce myself to people and share my interest in mind-body medicine, they're like, oh, you must really love the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza and this kind of stuff, and these meditations, and very prescriptive, very sit down, do this, follow the rules. But he does talk about this idea of kind of these habitual thoughts. We're thinking the same 99.9% of the thoughts all the time, at each and every day. And it's a matter of just like shaking up thoughts and being open to new thoughts. So anyways, I'm curious what your thoughts are on, teachings like that.
Yeah, again, I think I really have great respect for his medical knowledge. Like, I have not been to medical school, so I a lot of what I know about the science of pain and how we experience it is really come from these guys who've really learned and studied a lot. So, and his story about recovering from such a catastrophic car accident where his spine was messed up so badly is quite it's inspiring. But I think with a lot of these things, like the other one I have been told a lot about recently was polyvagal theory. I don't know if you know anything about that. Like, I forget the guy's name, but he was here where I live last month doing lectures on it. So everybody's like, oh, wow, you got to learn about polyvagal theory, And I think all of these guys, I think they're getting, the technology is enabling us to get into more and more deeper detail of understanding of how the body works, how the brain works. Although I don't think we'll ever really understand how the brain works. But what I found is, as much as the technical information is fascinating, they're still kind of coming with an outside-in solution. They're kind of getting closer to seeing, yes, it's thought, but now what we can do about the thought, like what do we control it? So whether it's meditation or it's, I don't think there's anything wrong with meditation, or there's anything wrong with breathing techniques, or because often we need to slow down is really important. But then I think, because something else that is really big in the kind of pain management world is journaling. So it's journaling and meditation and all these kind of things. And really what they're doing is they're still looking at the content of the thought. Like you said, it's prescriptive. And so as long as you're still looking at a technique to fix it, as much as you could get some relief from that, I think it's usually temporary. And specifically to go back to Joe Dispenza's stuff, like I joined a Facebook group because I was just curious what was out there and what people were doing, and I'm nosy, and you know, I wanted to see what was going on. And I noticed that a lot of people in his groups, and this maybe not a reflection on him, it's because, you know, this is the people who are following, you know, what he's doing, were saying like, oh, I love the meditation on finances. What's the meditation on divorce, or what's the meditation on dealing with kids? And I'm thinking, but if you got relief from the meditation that helps with, you know, like I don't know, medical stuff, or your husband, like, would not the same understanding apply to whatever situation you're in? Because I think that for me is one of the reasons why I love the three principles, is because they're so neutral that it's not about applying it to the situation and applying it to that. Like I'll apply it to my headache, and now I'm going to apply it to my back pain. Oh, I've got foot pain now. What's the meditation or the journaling technique or whatever it is for foot pain? You know, so from understanding that I'm experiencing everything through my thinking, it doesn't really. It's not that it doesn't matter what's going on with you, because I think that's disrespectful to say to somebody, especially if they've been through, you know, a trauma or you know, a very difficult time. What we're saying is stepping back and watching it all as an experience that's made of thought is a much more helpful way of looking at it. Because I see all those techniques now. It's almost like they're like gas stations. And people go and fill up on calm or relaxing or insights. You know, we're going to go fill up and do some more journaling. I'm going to do some more meditation. I'm going to do some more, you know, whatever the thing is. And then, like when you go and fill up your car at the gas station, eventually the gas runs out, and you have to go back for some more, and you have to go back for some more. And so it's like, so anybody who's doing acupuncture or you know, like, I don't know, journaling or whatever it is, there's like hundreds of different techniques out there, from body therapy to EMDR to, you know, like, and so without an understanding of the bigger picture, you're going to need to keep going back to it. So I found that I you know, once I've understood it, how the mind works, I don't need to keep going back and filling up. We are full. That is our nature, is to be full. You know, it's like there's nothing to go fill up.
I'm totally on board, on the same wavelength, and really appreciate the way that you talked about that. And it's just so interesting that we do 100% live in a world where people are told that they need something. They're told, you need more of this, you need less of this, you need to get rid of this, you need to unpack your baggage, and you need to deal with that trauma. You need more relaxation, more peace, more meditation, more yoga, more pills and supplements, vitamins, whatever. It's just like, I need something that I don't have. Who's got it? And what's a good way to take it? And you know, it's marketing, it's everything, right?
Yeah.
So it is really a total revolutionary mind shift, kind of paradigm shift, whatever word you want to use, way of looking at the world, which doesn't maybe fit in our society like right now immediately for everybody. Right. So on that note, like, I'm sure you've had many a story of someone who has just been really resistant, and maybe, like, you know, been told, oh, you should go, you know, work with Hana, and you should, you know, go attend one of her talks and just try it out, just be present. So what's your experience with kind of the skeptics, or the people who, like, you know, live in this world, in this outside in world, and just have a hard time opening up to the consideration, or opening up to the possibility of things being differently?
Yeah. When I first kind of started working with people with pain, and like I said, I joined quite a few Facebook groups just to see what was out there. And so I saw so much busy work, you know, so busy, like you said, they're like getting this and buying that course and doing this and trying, you know, and I think that's part of the perfectionist, goodist personality to keep searching and looking. I've got to get to find the right way to do it. I'll do pain the right way.
Yeah, if I
And
still
so,
have pain, I must not be doing it good enough.
Right, exactly. So there's, then they're jumping from this technique to that method to the next book and the next understanding. And so I came along and I started posting little comments, and I started saying, well, maybe you don't have to do anything. And people were like, what? What?
Kick her out of the group.
Yeah, like you obviously have not experienced pain like I have. That's the kind of reactions I got. Like, and I say, well, let's see, fractured skull, herniated discs, broken vertebrae. Yeah, actually, I have. I've actually passed out. At work, like rushed off to the emergency room. I remember the doctor at. I used to work in Hollywood, and so I was in Los Angeles, and I remember being rushed off to an urgent care center in Chatsworth, and from working on a movie. And I remember the doctor saying to me, "What would you say the level of pain was from like 0 to 10?" I'd say like 15. It was off the charts, So when I started saying maybe you don't have to do anything, maybe the busy work is what's causing or contributing to the stress of the experience. People were quite offended at first, and like clearly I didn't understand what they were talking about. So I then started saying, well, I've been pain-free for 5 years, and I didn't do any journaling or any meditation or any of these other things. And people started getting curious. And so that's how I got to have like 1,000 people in my Facebook group now, because people started getting curious. And I'm getting a lot of messages from people now saying that they're sick of writing and they're sick of meditating. That there's not enough, like some people tell me that they've been told to do expressive writing and they've run out of stuff to write, to the point where they're now writing, I've got nothing to write. And they're like, keep writing. I'm like, really? It's crazy. So when I told people that I just say, maybe you don't have to do anything, I found that sometimes people misunderstand that, and they think that they've just got to sit there in pain
and be like complacent.
Yeah, like suck it up, and that's what it, that's this is as good as it gets, and that's not what we're saying. When we say there's nothing to do, what we're actually meaning is there's nothing to do about the thinking. Thought moves on its own. It's like the obvious analogies are like the clouds in the sky or a river. Clouds don't need my permission, my encouragement, my analysis to move. It's just they're just going to move anyway, or buses. There's always going to be another one, And so thought is like that. It's continuously moving through my mind. So when we say you don't actually have to do anything, that's what we mean, is that I don't have to do anything to analyze or control or manage my thinking at all. In fact, that's kind of messes with the system. And messing with the system is probably what's contributing to the pain. And when I say pain, it could also be, I've worked with people with eczema and IBS and migraines and, all kinds of things. And fibromyalgia is like the ultimate, in mind-body connection, really. So in my experience, when I do nothing with my thinking, when I'm able to step back and be an observer, the thinking like calms down. And it moves, and it's like taking the garbage out of a stream, and the water starts flowing again. And then I get clear ideas about what I should do. Maybe I should, go for a walk or do some water aerobics, or maybe I should, change my diet, or maybe I should just, chill, go watch Netflix, whatever it is. It doesn't have that kind of comes. I think especially for perfectionists and goodists, like we're kind of like not good at allowing ourselves to just be. You should be efficient and working hard and getting a lot done. I was very much brought up like that kind of Puritan work ethic was very very English. You gotta keep going. And so it was for me to see that part of that was what I was. Torturing myself with my own thinking. When it slowed down, I think people find it fascinating when I say I didn't do anything to get rid of my pain. My pain went away when my thinking slowed down and when I got more and more insights into why and how my brain works. And so then the insights came that, I could read some Dr. Sarno books, or I could, do more exercise or not exercise. It was really, it was what we call our innate wisdom was able to come through when my thinking slowed down. So there can be what to do, but it usually comes from the understanding and an insight rather than a doing to fix it, if that makes sense.
Well, I'm really present with you here and now and feeling peaceful. And, I do notice thoughts like, oh, I want to talk about this. I want to be sure to bring this up.
Right.
And, but by and large, I feel like in this moment, I have a peaceful mind. And then there were thoughts that came up like, oh my gosh, that tension, like, shouldn't that be a little less? Because I'm feeling peace in my peace of mind. I'm feeling present, like, but that tension is still there. So, coach me through this connection between my peaceful mind and the pain that I want to be gone. Because I'm sure a lot of people who you're working with are like, okay, like, I feel peaceful. I've got this peaceful understanding. I'm present. And I still feel pain. Like, what do I do?
Right. Yeah, you make a very good point. And I've never promised anybody that I can make them pain-free. That really does come from a combination of insights and sometimes time for the body to heal. I just want to give an example because this just keeps coming to my head. It's because I think at that point in the conversation, there's usually room to start talking about the science of how pain actually manifests for us. And one of the doctors that I really like is Dr. Lorimer Moseley. I don't know if you know that name, but he's Australian. He's done amazing pain work. He started out as a physiotherapist. He's now a pain professor. He went to, I think, Oxford University and did some work there, and he's back in, he works mostly in New South Wales and in Australia, helping local people in Australia, but he's now got teams of people who are teaching around the world, and it's kind of like pain science. And when I first started understanding how pain actually appears in our minds or in our experience, one of the things that really helped me was a very short video. It's about 2 or 3 minutes long on YouTube, about phantom limb pain. And it's the video, I think, is made in the 80s or the 90s, and it's a neurosurgeon by the name of I can never say his name, Indian name, Ramachandran, I think his name is. Anyway, I can give you the link if people want to know where it is. And he had a patient who had lost his arm from the elbow down, and this patient, after about 2 weeks after the surgery, started feeling his missing hand clenched like a fist, and the pain was excruciating, like going up his arm. But because he didn't have a fist anymore, he couldn't unclench it, right? So he'd gone to all kinds of doctors and chiropractors and massage and tried all the things we've been talking about, and nothing was working. Now, when I saw him in working with the doctor, the first thing I thought of, when I clench my fist at you, what does that say? It says anger, right? Clenched fist is
anger.
Yes, right, frustration. So that was the first thing I thought of when I saw that. And who could blame the guy? He's lost his arm. I mean, I don't know why or how it happened, but so this brilliant doctor, this neurosurgeon, tried thinking of ways to help him. And he came up with this thing called a mirror box, which now has become quite standard treatment in this kind of situation. So he made a box with a mirror in one side of the wall. And he got him to put his good hand, clench it and put it in. And when he saw the reflection, he goes like this, and the pain went away. Because the neurosurgeon explained that there was a message going from his brain down his arm to clench the fist. But there wasn't, because there's not a fist, there's no message coming back to his brain. So by putting it in front of the mirror, by looking at the mirror, the reflection of it, his brain could see the hand unclench, and the pain went away. And I found out that was so brilliant doctor. He's still like, he does TED Talks now, and he's like, 20 years, 30 years later, he's like helping more and more people. But to see that pain only happens in the brain. Like we think like the pain is in my back, or the pain is in my neck, or the pain's in my elbow, my knee, but the pain is actually happening in the mind. And Dr. Mosley has got a lot of great videos explaining how pain is, he calls it a protectometer. It's like pain is protecting me from hurting myself more. Like there are people actually who don't have pain sensors. It's quite rare, but those people, they don't last very long, because if you can't feel, then you're going to get cuts and burns and infections, and those people really don't last long. So pain is, it's a message, it's a signal. And if it's acute pain, like say you, I don't know, sprain your ankle or fracture a bone or something, that immediate pain is a message saying to you, go to the hospital, or take your weight off your ankle, like do this to take care of it, get the cut cleaned up, so it doesn't get infected. Acute pain is always there to help us, protect us from danger. But I was reading some amazing research recently, which showed that if you put electrodes on people's heads and they're in pain, acute pain shows up in the front part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. But chronic pain, which is pain that's lasted more than 3 months, it shifts to the emotional part of the brain. Because all injuries, even if you fracture your femur bone, which is what I learned from Dr. Sarno, will heal in 4 to 6 weeks. Slip discs, well, actually discs can't slip, I shouldn't say that. That's a whole, talk about language. Anyway, bulging discs can heal. Like, no one ever told me that. I've seen so many chiropractors around the world when over the 25 years I had chronic pain. Not a single person told me that a bulging hip disc can heal. It can, right? Disc degeneration is like, everybody has degeneration on their spines. From the age of 20, spines start to degenerate. So what is pain doing? Pain is giving me a message to protect my body. So when it shifts to chronic pain, when the injury is healed, whatever's gone wrong is being taken care of, if I'm still in pain and it's coming from the emotional part of my brain, then it has to be thought, right? Only thinking is producing that physical experience. So to go back to your point of like, if I'm feeling calm and I'm still experiencing pain, then like I'm trying to understand the pain science of it more and more. So it's like, bear with me, because it's like, this is like, I find it fascinating, and I'm reading and like watching videos all the time. I think like what they, that I'm sure you've heard the phrase, neurons that fire together will wire together. And it's kind of like a habit, and the brain kind of gets into a habit of protecting you. So if it sees you as in being in danger, and stressful thinking is kind of sets the body off in that kind of fight or flight response, and adrenaline and cortisol are running around the body, and glucose and doing its thing, then the brain starts to like recognize that. And that's how the brain works. Like, thank God, because like when you learn to ride a bicycle, or you're writing your name when you're a kid, you learn to tense these muscles, release that tendon, like to use the bicycle to write your name. And that's how we learn. To that repetitive motion and the repetitive experience becomes like locked into your brain, so you don't have to think about how to riding a bicycle. You don't have to think about how to write your name with a pen. But the same thing can happen with pain. So if you get into a familiar situation, then the body will start to react, because that's what it knows to do. So like I say, I've been pain-free for 5 years. But I'll tell you, for 2 days, I had terrible pain in the middle of that experience, where I was reading a book about pain, and my back started to hurt, and the muscles in my back started to get really uncomfortable, and I started to get like, I knew as soon as I stood up, my pelvis is going to be like slanted, and I could start feeling the pain shooting down my leg. And I laughed, because the book I was reading was so graphic and so it was a book by a man called Steve Ozanich, who's one of like a big promoter of Dr. Sarno's work. And it's a really big, thick book, and it's some like his story was horrific, what happened to Steve. And I'm reading it and it's reminding me of things that happened to me. And like, so my brain is like gone into like thinking about stress, about being attacked, about being, you know, in all that pain I was in. So it's not surprising that my back started to react. I was sitting in a comfortable chair on holiday, reading a book I wanted to read. So it could only have been my thinking. I hadn't done anything. I was in a good place. And I knew as soon as I finished reading the book, the pain would go away, because that could be the only thing that was causing it. And it took me 2 days to read the book because it was quite thick. And at first I thought maybe I shouldn't be doing this because why am I putting myself in pain? But I was so confident that I knew the pain would go away as soon as I finished the book that I kept reading because there was a lot of great information in there. And as soon as I put the book down, pain went away. So it was like, it just confirmed in my mind that the whole experience is coming from my perception and possibly, so it could be like a habitual thing that needs to be like any bad habit, you know, it takes a bit of training your brain to like let go of it, or maybe there's some thinking that we're not aware of, or you know, it's an individual thing, but I think the more we understand, and I think probably the most important thing I could say is there's actually nothing wrong, and you can move and you're not going to hurt yourself. In fact, moving is probably the best thing you could do. So when we're done talking, you've got to get up and walk around.
I think my wisdom's telling me to chill. Actually,
okay.
I already ran 9 miles this morning.
All right. Okay, yeah. All right.
But as you were sharing your story about reading that book and that kind of triggering some pain in your body, it got me curious about your relationship with trauma, because I know trauma is like a really trendy topic to talk about and identify with and work through in our world today. And I'm just curious, I think a lot of people, we're all traumatized, as the human experience is traumatizing, right? And maybe we don't want to use that word. I don't know what your thoughts are about that, but I think that we're maybe overusing the word. But anyways, my point is, there's no doubt that you've been traumatized, that you've had these traumatic experiences that have been, mugging 3 times and injuries and broken bones and the terror that's involved with that. There's no doubt that you, like out of anyone on planet Earth, like you have the right to identify with being traumatized. So, and it sounds like you don't, like, I don't get the sense that you are living with this PTSD diagnosis or feeling traumatized in your daily life. So what is your relationship with your trauma now?
It's funny you should ask that, because I kind of, a couple of days ago, I was almost asking myself that same question, because like you said, a lot of people want to ask me, and I actually am a trained psychotrauma counselor, and we have this amazing unit here where I live where if someone causes the emergency number, not only do they get a choice of paramedic or ambulance or police, but we have a psychotrauma unit, and we're trained to go out to a situation, whether it be a car accident or a terrorist attack, something like that. And so that's where I learned also a lot of my medical information. But my relationship with my trauma really is that I don't have an emotional relationship with it anymore. Like, it's fact, it happened, but I'm not emotionally attached to it anymore. Like, for a long time, it was part of my identity. I was the girl who was mugged 3 times, and I could weave my tragedy into the story, no matter what you were talking about, right? Because I felt like that was like who I am, and if I could either get you to feel sorry for me, I could impress you with it, how courageous I am, I could blow anybody else's tragedy out the water. Like, I had I mentioned it.
Traumatize them.
Right. We used to call it competitive tragedy. I could have gone for gold medal for England in competitive tragedy, right? Because someone would say like, "Oh yeah, I twisted my ankles." Like, that's nothing. my neck was broken, I mean, that would just blow anybody's tragedy out of the water, which is so disrespectful, but I used to do it, because I needed to be, like, I needed you to know how much pain I was in and how much I was suffering. And then it just became like currency. It was great for, getting sympathy or getting attention or getting something, And I spoke here, Mara Gleason, who is a Three Principles teacher. She had a conference here. We organized a conference where I live in Hebrew University. I live in Jerusalem, and she had me speak on a panel called Reimagining Fear. And so I told my story in quite a lot of detail. And I thought I was going to die. These men were like, 3 men mugged me, and beating the living daylights out of me, left me for, well, not for dead, but it was pretty bad. I really thought I was going to die. And I was sharing this in this conference, and people came up to me afterwards, I don't know if they were like professors or students at the university, and they were baffled how I could talk about it in such a neutral way. Because they're coming from a mindset that you're damaged, that you're broken, and this is gonna the best we can do is teach you how to cope with it. I did a lot of work on getting well from that for quite a long time before I came across the principles, and I started seeing that that it really was it wasn't happening now. Like, I'm right now, I'm safe. And you could say, well, it's 30 years ago now. I mean, that's what I would say. But I've met people who are suffering from things that happened 50 years ago, because they're still reliving it.
Veterans and everything. Yeah. Right.
So it kind of goes back to this thing I was saying earlier about being an observer of the thoughts. That, for example, for I'd say a good 10 years afterwards, the sound of footsteps behind me would like, I don't actually like the word trigger, because it's so not just this, but so I don't know. It's kind of blaming, and it doesn't like take responsibility somehow. It's like saying it's like, it's you triggered me. It's like
it's outside in.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly why I don't like the word trigger. So I'd say I thought of a word recently. Now I forgot what it was. Like, so I would hear footsteps behind me, and it would activate, a stress response. And for a long time, it would be like, and I could be walking on Venice Beach, beautiful sunshine with my friends in the middle of the day, and it would be like somebody jogging, or someone, like a kid running for a bus or something, and I'd be like, what was that? And then when I started understanding how my mind works, it's not like I had to work on, okay, it's all safe, if everything's good. It just went away. And I've had that with quite a few things now with the principles. When you have this understanding, you don't actually have to work on stuff. It just, when you see through the illusion of it, like it. Now, today, if I hear footsteps behind me, I do look, because, it's probably a good idea to look and see if there's someone with going to stab you, or like whoever it could be. But today I look because I choose to. Right? And not because it's an automatic response. And if I were to have something like that was, actually, I just don't. I'm trying to think of an example, because I remember I was walking home with a friend a few months ago. We were walking home late from an event, and we're just chatting, walking along the street. It's like dark. It was about 11 o'clock at night. There's street lamps, And she turned to me and she said, "You're not scared, are you?" I said, "What of?" And she said, I know what happened to you in the past. I'm just fascinated that we are walking along and you're not scared. But I'm in my own neighborhood. I'm why would I be scared? And so I started seeing how trauma, it really is a state of mind. And I've, done a lot of work with people with trauma, and I've seen people traumatized clearly by most terrible things, like abuse and violence and rape and all those kind of things. And then I've seen other people who are traumatized by things that you and I would dismiss as nothing. But what I came to see is it's not about comparing, like you said, like, are those people overusing the word trauma or traumatized? Because I've met people who were so stressed by their thinking that they are experiencing as much trauma as I did when I was beaten up. So it's not about comparing. It's like in her mind or his, their tortured thinking is as bad as mine was about being beaten. And like I live here in Israel, and so we have a lot of trauma here. And the first year I was living here, I was on a bus that exploded. Now, as if I hadn't been through enough, right?
Yeah, geez, no big deal.
Right? I'll just throw this one in. Anyway,
Yeah.
so I was on an intercity bus, and we're traveling about, I don't know, 70 miles an hour on the freeway, and then boom, the bus, it was a massive explosion. The bus tipped, smoke going through the cabin, the lights went out. The driver is amazing. He managed, like, Israel bus drivers are all previously tank drivers. They're pretty good at driving. So he managed to get the bus over to the side, onto the hard shoulder, like this. People were screaming for their lives. It was absolutely terrifying. And I was sat kind of near the front, like just a couple of seats back from the driver, and everybody's pushing and pushing and pushing to get off the bus. And after we got off the bus, we found out that it was, thank God, not a bomb. It was the engine had exploded and burst the tire, and that's where the noise and the violent shake in the bus had come from. But because of where we live, these terrible things happen, and so everybody was just screaming and pushing. I could still, like, if I picture in my head, I could still see men like climbing over the tops of the seats to get out, and I could hear women in the back. I thought they were being stabbed. I mean, it was that kind of screaming because everybody's panicking and pushing. So that kind of experience, I was a bit like messed up, I'd say, for 2 days, and then it went. Like, when those other things happened to me, I was messed up for years because I didn't understand what's happening. I got caught in that loop of reliving it and reliving it. When this happened to me on the bus, because I now understood, what's happening, and I'm in a much better place, I could feel my brain was a bit kind of discombobulated by the whole experience, which is normal.
Right. You've got a healthy brain working for you.
That's a normal reaction. Like when I did my training as a trauma first responder, one of the first things we were taught is you are having a normal reaction to an abnormal situation.
Right.
Trauma is like that kind of trauma is abnormal. So if you're shaking, you can't sleep, you can't eat, that is normal, right? It doesn't mean you're broken or need fixing. It means you're being normal. And so after the bus thing, for about 2 or 3 days, I wasn't sleeping properly. I was very on edge. I was very hypervigilant, all the kind of things that come with PTSD. And then it went away because my brain kind of shuffled back into made sense of what had happened. I was safe. I was not hurt. Nobody, thank God, was hurt on the, the bus driver was amazing. He got us all to safety. And the police were there in seconds to make us safe on the side of the road, the freeway. And then another bus came along and took us, all back to the bus station. So we were fine. But it took a couple of days, but then I was back to normal again. And I think one of the things I've learned, and this kind of ties in with pain as well, is to not judge those kind of thoughts. Because if I judge them and say, I shouldn't be feeling like this, or I shouldn't have this pain, or I shouldn't, once I start getting to judging it, that is going to escalate the stress response and make it all worse. And so what I've seen now, I guess it's going back to pain, but it's seeing that there's the pain, there's the physical aspect of it. And I guess there's a physical aspect of trauma also in terms of, not being able to sleep or being hypervigilant, all that kind of stuff. And then there's my thoughts about it. And my thoughts about it can make anything 10 times, 100 times worse. And probably make recovery take longer as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's thoughts about your thoughts about your thoughts about your thoughts about that, just the layers.
Right.
The layers upon layers. Well, your story about the bus is fascinating and really speaks to, your resilience, the innate resilience that is built into all of us. And I can't help but just think about the alternative reality where Hana was maybe not learning the principles, not exposed to this, and just another traumatic event weighing on you. Because I think that there is a type that just kind of I don't know. I hate saying this. I hate saying this, but like a kind of type that just kind of attracts in on some level these traumatic events.
Right. Yeah.
And for learning, for spiritual growth, like whatever, I don't know. But it's just interesting how some people tend to get traumatized. But it's like, all right, you I guess you learned. I don't you like you got it. You,
Yeah.
you got it. You
Bring
got
it
the
on.
three
I can have
muggings. Like,
it.
however, like you got it. And now you're here to teach and share and show
Mhm.
the human potential, the possibility of just
Yeah.
connecting with your innate health and resilience.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's really inspiring.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's really the message is no matter what happens to us, and people go through much worse horrendous things than I've gone through, but we aren't broken. Like we always say, like in a our minds are not broken and don't need fixing. It just needs understanding. Same is true of the body. It's like even if the pain doesn't go away, let's say the pain is part of, it hangs around for a long time. My thinking about it is only going to make it worse. And I've had clients now who, like their pain has gotten a little bit better, but it's still there. But what they tell me is that they don't have anything on it anymore. Like I used to have so much on it. Like, what does it mean? I got to analyze it. Like I'm not going to spend more money, like to get the chiropractor to fix it. And it was like there was so much on it, the whole story, and like to be able to have pain or trauma or whatever it is and not have anything on it, that's freedom. That really is freedom. And the more free you feel, then the less those reactions are going to come, and the body calms down and can naturally heal itself, because
Yeah.
that's what it does.
Right. Like you
Yeah.
said earlier, I liked what you said earlier about, you can have pain, but you don't want the pain to have you. Um,
Right. Yeah.
so, on that note, just kind of tying things together, this wonderful conversation, it's been so great to kind of hear about, your story and what you've learned from it and how you're sharing. Um, I know we've already been talking for an hour, but how are you now? Like, what are you doing in the world? How are you sharing these teachings, these understandings? I know you've got a Facebook group that is just kind of an open place where people can share. But what else are you doing? How else are you working with people to support them in healing and understanding their pain and their health?
Right. Yeah. So I have I did a whole bunch of research about a year ago. I had 5 people doing a case study, like seeing if I could recreate the experience I had of coming across the 3 principles and pain relief. And so I did that research, and it was really successful. I mean, not everybody's going to get 100% pain free. I don't promise that to anybody, but people did start getting well. And so I turned that into a program. I have a 10-hour program. I called it Painless. It's pretty painless talking to me, I hope. And so that's a 10-hour program. I also do like one-on-one coaching. So, and in that program, I go over a lot of the science that we talked about today, like like how pain is experienced, and then take a really deep dive into the principles and understanding, how our experience actually works. So, and I work with people with trauma, and locally I have a lot of clients with high anxiety. It could be health anxiety, it can be like just social anxiety, and learning how the mind works, I think really helps in those situations too. So yeah, that's the main work I'm doing now. I'm writing a second book. My next novel is it's going to be about pain, right? So it's Deborah, who was in the first book. She's going to show up again and start researching like why her pain's gone away, and so all the ideas that I've just talked about, she's now going to go on a journey of like coming across Dr. Sarno's work and seeing how she can get involved in research and help. Because one of my dreams right now is to be able to get in front of medical professionals and bring these ideas to them, and to show that there's alternatives that to surgery and to opioids. And I'm meeting with doctors and physiotherapists now. It's starting to happen, and I'm really excited about that, to show them that there's alternatives, there's other ways to go. So if people want to get in touch with me, I have a website. It's hanastudley.com, which is CHANASTUDLEY.com. And so like you can find me on Facebook, and in the Facebook group we share a lot of this information. It's for fun and for free, and people answer questions and share their experiences. So yeah, it's great.
Awesome. Well, on that note, I'm just wondering if there's anything with all that we've said and shared here today, I'm wondering if there's anything that you feel is still left unsaid from you, or just kind of anything you'd like to drive home and maybe shift or spark an insight for anyone out there who's still struggling, resisting, in pain, whatever.
Just that, first of all, the pain is real. The pain is real. Like, because some people, their families or their co-workers tell them they're exaggerating or making it up. The pain is real, and it's exhausting. But they're like, the less I have on it, the more it doesn't have to be who I am. The pain, pain isn't who I am, and that you're well, and your body has this innate intelligence to heal itself, and just being open to the possibility that you can get well. It really can. It happens. I've seen it happen. I saw it once happen in a 5-minute conversation. I mean, that was quite a unique, rare situation, but it can happen. And for a lot of people, it just takes a conversation with someone who understands. That and understanding it is I think is the key, really. Yeah.
All right, Hana Studley, thank you so much for your time, sharing your wisdom, your experience, and really appreciate having this conversation with you.
Right. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Peace and love. Until next time.